So the next two words in Likutei Moharan are ubishvil zeh, because of this. So usually I do a review in this class because it's a good teaching method. We recall the information, the next information will be based on that. But here I have a deeper reason to do a review, which is that I have an explicit instruction from Rabbi Nachman to make a review. Bishvil zeh, when he says because, it is incumbent upon us to ask the question, because of what? Before I even read the outcome of that, we have to bishvil what? So the review will take somewhat of a different format than previous reviews. It'll be more of a thematic overview of what we've done. So far, we've discussed a number of different progressive levels in our avodas Hashem, specifically with relationship to tefillah and how the other aspects of avodas Hashem complement our ability to pray effectively and pray in a way that brings novelty into the world rather than just sort of shuffling around the pieces, as we've discussed before. And then we've reached this divine city of mishpat, where the Yetzer Hara tries to make trouble because mishpat is the source of all the emotions that everybody in the world gets. So if there's no Yetzer Hara in the city of mishpat, then we only have good emotions. And if there is, then we get other emotions. But one particular detail that I want to emphasize this time, and I think it's in keeping with a diktuk of Rabbi Nachman's words here, is that we've been using a progressive approach. Here's a step, here's the challenges at this step, here's the remedy for these challenges. New step, here's the challenge that the Yetzer Hara presents us at this level, here's the self-defense technology that we have at that level. And there's a lot of different ways to say because in Hebrew, and they all have subtly different connotations. And in some texts, it would be a mistake to overly medayek the particular word that they choose to use to write because. In a text that's sort of a longer explanation of a halacha with bringing various opinions, they may say because in different ways, and the point is not to medayek individual words. But the Likutei Moharan is a very concentrated book, and there's a few svarim that we say this about. In particular, of course, the Tanakh, particularly the Chumash, we say this about Teres Moshe Rabbeinu. This is said also about the Tanya of Chabad. When we learn the Gemara, we do this with the Mishnah, but we are to be extremely medayek once we're familiar with the overall themes in the Likutei Moharan. So he could say biglal, he could say mishum, but he chooses the word bishvil, and the shvil is like a pathway. So in this pathway is another way of translating bishvil. Given the general overarching approach that we're taking in Torah base, the following outcome will be, and now I'm going to read the next two words. Ubishvil zeh nikra Yosef. We're going to learn a nickname of Yosef and investigate the meaning of that nickname as pertains to our concept here, and what can we learn out from that in our personal avodas Hashem, in our personal lives. But first, given the pace of this class, sounds like we haven't really mentioned Yosef in a while. Where is Yosef coming from? Why is he significant here? So we did mention Yosef a long time ago in Torah Beis, but before that we mentioned Yosef in Torah Aleph. And there's something very particularly Yosef about Torah Beis. In Torah Aleph, Rabbi Nachman teaches us about the avodah of seeing the intelligence in everything, the purpose that God put in everything, and all the tikkunim that makes, all the problems that are superseded by getting straight to the point in that sort of way. And he gives the example of how Yaakov got the birthright from his brother Esav. So it's a good example. It demonstrates the concept very well, but there's a challenge, which is that it's a little bit unrelatable. So we're talking about in Torah Beis a progressive approach to dealing with the Yetzer Hara, whereas Yaakov confronts pretty much the walking Yetzer Hara. If you took all the Yetzer Hara, all the worst possible sins that one could do, when it says Esav went out to the field, then it says in the Gemara and it's Rashi, the worst possible sins they could do. So this is not something that a lot of us are ready for directly.
It's a struggle with the Yetzer Hara. wrestled with the Esav.
Oh, he's saying the Yaakov did it in terms of the angel of Esav. Right. So Yaakov is a very direct approach. And Yosef is mentioned briefly in Likutei Moharan 1. There were a lot of similarities between Yaakov and Yosef. They're considered to be like one. Yosef apparently looked physically identical to Yaakov. Also, they both had sibling issues. But there's a major difference in their sibling issues, which is that Yaakov, his sibling, was about the worst person that could possibly exist, and Yosef's siblings were all tzadikim. So there may have been misunderstandings, but we are to study closely the lives of the other brothers of Yaakov, the other sons of Yaakov, the brothers of Yosef, and learn out how actually, given the situations they were in, they actually did the best possible thing. This is a very important limud in Torah, to learn zchus and tzadikim, even when there's situations where there may be a misunderstanding. We're not necessarily told to do that concerning Esav. It's not like a universal thing we're supposed to do concerning Esav. And in our personal lives, if we try to think of, let's see, what's the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to me, or what's the worst historical event, or maybe even in current times event that I can think of, and how can I learn zchus on that? I'm not saying it can't be done, and obviously Yaakov Avinu did it, and I don't think Rabbi Nachman is saying that it can't be done, but it's a big step. So Yosef provides us a bridge. Okay, so the people around us in our inner circle who already we have pretty good relationships with, we can improve those relationships. In Likutei Moharan 1, it says that the Seichel Shabakal Davar who or Gadol Shemeir Bechal Derachov, that it lights up every path, not just the hard paths. And so it's like going to the gym, and you don't try to pull 3 plates right away. You lift little weights, and you get your form right, and you perfect, and you get stronger, and then you can work with the bigger weights. And so in Torah 1, even though we get many details about this technique, we're essentially given like sort of a cure-all technique, if you can do it. Likutei Moharan 2, there is a list of different techniques at different levels, and different challenges will present themselves. It's even evident in their names that Yosef is the language of adding. It's also a language of gathering. That there are all these individual things that we're gradually working our way up the ladder. And Yaakov is Yud Ekev. Yud is the first name of Hashem's 4-letter name. The first letter of Hashem's 4-letter name. It's like represents the highest of the loftiest things. And Ekev refers to the heel, the least lofty of things. So it's like the name Yaakov, it just jumps straight to the top. And we have to believe that there's a tzaddik emes who can do this. And also we have to recognize where we are and what will be best for us to attempt. And so we see this in their names. Now, we should not think that Yosef is not able to do what Yaakov does, to invert evil in the way that Yaakov does. We're talking here about taking over a city, essentially. That's what we're holding in Torah base. We get to the city of Mishpat. We finally reach this lofty spiritual level, the source of human emotion. Wow. And there's the Yetzer Hara everywhere making problems. And we learned in previous lessons from Rabbi Nachman and the classical commentaries on the sources that Rabbi Nachman refers us to, that we have to become a judge in this place. And we even learned a remedy of that sounds like a lifelong endeavor, but okay, so the tzadikim know how to think about time. So we have our self-defense tactics even when we get to the city of Mishpat. But more than self-defense, we have to take over. And who did that better than Yosef? Yosef had tzaddik. He took over with Egypt. It says in Sefer, it says, why does Hashem tell us not to act like the deeds that they did in Egypt? And it says, we could just say like all the other nations, why specify Egypt? Because Egypt was the worst place in the world. And so it's similar to the issue with Esav. So, and Yosef did, with his approach and the approach that he's teaching to us, take over all of Egypt. And so it makes sense thematically now why Yosef is brought up here. But what's not going to make immediate sense is the nickname that we are attributing to Yosef based on the teachings in Likutei Moharan so far, and we'll need to investigate that a little more deeply. So the nickname is Ben Poras Ale Ayin. Ben Poras. So the simple translation of the words, and this will be what Rashi brings first, is Ben Poras is someone who's very attractive. It's like Lashon Tiferes. He's so in Ale Ayin, he's eye-raisingly attractive. Rashi says, as the verse concludes, that the women in Egypt would climb up the wall of the palace in order just to gaze upon Yosef. But what does that have to do with a step-by-step progression and inverting evil and becoming a judge? It seems like sort of a difficult connection. And so, of course, Rabbi Nachman is including in this all of the commentaries that have ever been said. So we'll look into some of those commentaries. Maybe we'll understand a little more closely. So Rashi, in the Chumash, explains these words in two ways. First is sort of along the lines of the simple translation. That his grace is planted in the eye of all that see him. Anybody that looks upon Yosef, they just like him right away. Fine, that's the Vishat from... Then he says, he gives another concept, le'inyan. It's going to be a completely different concept. We're going to learn about this. That we believe in Judaism that if someone looks at you bad, looks at a person bad, it's not just unpleasant in the moment, that it actually can cause harm. Now, depending on someone's spiritual level, this harm can be mitigated. In the beginning of the Gemara in Baba Basra, we talk about hizikriya, visual damage. Does it count as damage legally if someone just can sort of look? And it depends. If someone can look into the window of your house, if that's visible from the street or something, that is more damaging, it's more private. Or if you have a courtyard and there's a major thoroughfare there and just hundreds of people every day see into your that, even though they're seeing a not that private place, it's a lot of eyes all on. We learn specifically with regard to spiritual levels, the difference between a field and a garden is that in a field you have big hardy crops. Already an ayin hara is not really going to do anything to these crops. But in a garden, there's a law that you can actually force a neighbor to participate in the building of a wall so that they cannot gaze jealously upon the pretty flowers in your garden, because in a garden, a home garden, it's not so strong. It's not industrial strength plants here. And actually the law in the Gemara there is that it can be considered damaging, them looking negatively. So the ayin hara is a subtly damaging thing. And if someone reaches a spiritual level like Yosef did, it doesn't actually affect them at all. But it is something to be aware of. And if even this trait is passed on to his children when they receive the brachas. His children are compared to fish. Fish are in the sea. You can't see fish. It's brought in Likutei Moharan about the various different animals that are eaten by humans, and particularly Jews. Various processes are required to make them kosher. And for a cow, which is a rather visible animal, it would be not so easy to hide a cow. It requires a rigorous, both of the carotid arteries must be cut perfectly in one stroke. By a bird is different. One, it's smaller, two, it flies. So a bird, if you look up, you can see it. But it's not as visible. And so it's a less rigorous requirement. That I think the din is that b'diavad, if someone only cuts one of the carotid arteries, that it's okay. A fish doesn't require shechita at all. Why? What's the difference? Because you don't even see a fish at all. So the fish is hidden. So these two explanations in Rashi seem to contradict. One of them is that he's eye-raisingly beautiful and everybody gazes upon him and it catches attention right away. We see with Potiphar's wife, who took too much of a harmful amount of liking to Yosef. Now he flipped it around and he sort of used it as leverage to take over the kingdom. And in the long run, that's to make a complex story very overly simplified. But I think it's a well-known story, so I don't need to elaborate on the details of the story. Versus this other explanation that he's like hidden. How do we rectify these two things in this one nickname? First of all, because Rabbi Nachman told us Bishvil Zeh, which is a reminder that we should do a thematic overview of what we've learned so far, at least in Torah Beis. At the beginning of Torah Beis, we are introduced to the idea of the prayers of Mashiach. The Mashiach is a special way of praying that It isn't our default way of praying, and this is something that we're learning about in Torah base, is what is special about Mashiach's modality of prayer. One thing is that it is hidden and it is revealed. It is very physical. He brings from a Zohar, introduces the teaching with a Zohar that says that Mashiach sits by Hashem's nose, Kaviyachil, and but the teaching from the Zohar is from a book of the Zohar called the Sefer Ditzniusa, the book of the hidden, the book of hiddenness. And so we explore this theme of a nose, that it has sort of this dual thing going, this dual dynamic, that it is the most visible part. It's like right on the nose if you say something obvious, right? It's the foremost part of somebody's body. It is, as long as someone walks with good posture, it's probably the thing that's there first. But also, the sinus cavity is like this sort of deep, dark, mysterious world. If somebody has a runny nose, it can be extremely bothersome, even though it isn't that harmful of a thing. And it's sort of like, well, where is it even coming from? I'm not a physician. I don't know what's going on in there. It's not like I can feel the bones in my hand and get a general sense. It's just hidden completely. So, Mashiach's prayers have these two aspects to them. We said in brief that how these manifest, at least for us, as we can understand, that the mitzvahs lo yisais in particular. This is the first step we're given in increasing the potency of our prayers, is to be very careful about the negative commandments of the Torah. There's a certain advantage to the negative commandments in the Torah, which is that they utilize the full body. They're very physical in nature. When I put on tefillin, I'm using my arm and I'm using my forehead, and that's basically what I'm using. When I don't eat a cheeseburger, my whole body is not eating that cheeseburger. Every drip of blood that's going through my veins and all the muscles that they're nourishing, and when they go to my brain and that controls my nervous system, all of it is completely without the influence of that cheeseburger. And every drop of that is to the merit of the Jew who refrained from eating the cheeseburger. So there is a very physical, full body aspect. One moves their full self when they observe carefully in mitzvah lo yisais. The other thing is, nobody really knows that I didn't eat a cheeseburger. I just look like a guy that walked, I'm just going about my day. Nobody's like, oh, what are you doing today? Oh, I'm very busy. What are you busy with? I'm busy not eating a cheeseburger. It's like a non-thing. What's your job? Oh, I'm a non-chef. Okay, so what's your job exactly? So it's invisible also. And so we talked at length before about how this increases the potency of our prayers and how this is utilized by Mashiach. And so we can see thematically, on a thematic level at least, how these two explanations could both apply to Yosef, someone who has mastered this avoda of Torah base, who is the exemplar of this avoda in Torah base. Because of the hidden and the revealed. However, what we said at the beginning of the lesson about what hidden means with the mitzvahs lo yisais, and we already know that. Why is Rabbi Nachman insinuating that again? Or there must be a chiddush. So this time, now that we've done more avoda, now that we've come closer to, sort of the avoda of Yaakov, that once we're in the city of mishpat, we are much better prepared now. We've done a lot of the surrounding work in the gym, and strengthened our tertiary muscles and gotten our form together and done some relatively heavy lifts. We're ready to approach the bench a little bit more now. I'm not saying that what's going on in mishpat is all of Esav, but it's much closer to Esav than where we started, that we should just look at our friends better. Okay, so now if there's a force that's sending negative emotions to people in the world, that's a pretty bad guy who's doing that. So now we have something a little bit bigger to deal with. And so we need a new level of hiddenness. We need a new understanding of what this hidden aspect is. So there's another commentary here. There's a Sefer Kehilas Yaakov, that it's sort of a dictionary or maybe maybe an encyclopedia, something like that. It's structured like a dictionary. It's alphabetical, and there's these various words, and for each word, it'll give an explanation of that word. And then when we go look in the Torah and we read a passage with that word, we'll have a deeper understanding of that passage. So here, we're going to talk about this nickname, specifically this word Poras. Now, I translated it as beautiful. It also is translated in many different ways. It's also translated as referring to like poiresh, like he's able to explain things. But here we're going to bring a different idea than that. So the Kehilas Yaakov opens by rattling off 7 names of God. If you take the Yud Kei Vav Kei name and you spell each of the letters, there's different ways you can spell the letters. You can spell Hey as Hey Yud, or you can spell it as Hey Aleph or Hey Hey. You can spell Vav, Vav Yud Vav, or Vav Aleph Vav, which is Vav Vav. And depending on how you spell out the individual letters, you get different alphanumeric correspondences. You get different gematrias. So the first 4 names here are the 4 common ways of spelling the Shem Havaya, followed by 3 names that there's another the name Absak Maban. And then if you spell the name Ekyeh, when Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to Hashem for the first major time, and Hashem tells him that you have to go free the Jews from Egypt, and he's like, well, they're going to at least ask who told me to do that or something. Like, I need a little bit something to tell them. Hashem tells him, I'll be what I'll be. But he's actually telling him a name, right? He's saying, Ekyeh Asher Ekyeh, that's a name. So the Shem Ekyeh, Aleph, Hey, Yud, Hey, is also a name and can be spelled in different ways depending on how you spell the letters. What's that?
That's the fifth.
No, he brings 3 different spellings. If you do the Malui, you spell of Ekyeh. So you spell Aleph, that's the same way, but Hey can change, right? That's the factor that changes. There's 3 ways to spell Hey. In the Shem Havaya, you have a Vav, so that's another letter that can be spelled in different ways. But in the Shem Ekyeh, there's 3.
4 of Havaya and 3 of Ekyeh?
Yeah.
So
7 names that are brought here. Now, the point is not to get into the Kabbalistic mathematics of these names here, but an interesting mathematical fact is that when you total up these numbers, it equals the word Ephrasa, is what he says here, but also that's if you combine the first and last letter, it's Poras. It's the name that Yosef is called here.
If you combine the first and the last letter of...
What's written in the Kehilas Yaakov here is a word Ephrasa that's spelled Aleph, Pei, Resh, Tav, Hey. So that equals the gematria of those 7 names combined. However, if you take the Aleph at the beginning and the Hey at the end, and you just make a Vav out of that, 1, 5, 6, and put that up, then you get Pei, Vav, Resh, Tzav, Poras. So within this name of Yosef, this name that we loosely translated as beautiful, are these 7 names of God. And so we see this stratiation. And this very closely resembles what we've been talking about in this particular teaching. These different spiritual levels that we achieve and the challenges and the way we overcome them. The point being that there are different levels. There's a Likutei Halachos who talks about what does it mean that we can turn our intentional sins into merits. A famous statement in the Gemara, and he gives a new explanation of that, which is to make Torahs specifically out of them. Whatever unique experiences a person have had and whatever mistakes they made, when they come into the Torah and they learn Torah, now they can explain those matters that they experienced and that surely there are other people who experience and could use good advice. They can explain them from the Torah and they have a new way to fix them from the Torah, probably a novel way. They have novel experiences and there is much novelty in the Torah. So Torah is a very good tool for providing novel solutions to classic problems. And so it's like making signposts along the road. And now a tzaddik is able to travel to different realms. He's able to go high, he's able to go low. People who are low have their own issues. People who are high also can have issues with pride and matters like this. So the tzaddik is able to remedy all these people. And how does the tzaddik know how to get around these spiritual worlds? They have many signposts. Now, the tzaddik themselves, they don't have any sins. Or if they did, that they became a tzaddik at some point in life, they fixed all their sins and turned them into merits. But they meet people all the time who need help. And so they're able to take the stories of these people that are shared with them. We're encouraged in Likutei Moharan to share our personal stories with tzadikim when someone is qualified as a tzaddik. And then they make Torah out of them. They have a new signpost.
Who makes the Torah?
The tzaddik. The tzaddik. When the person learns enough that they can do it themselves, that's very good. And while we're in the process of that, it's very good to do vidui devarim lifnei tamid chacham, to go to the Talmud Chacham, and he explains difficulties we've had in terms of Torah.
So other people's stories are signposts? It's like a key?
Yes. Our own stories we can make signposts, and also for someone who doesn't, their stories are fixed, basically, or they never had any challenges in the first place. If they were born a tzaddik, then other people's challenges, they can make signposts. And now their spiritual world is not just a mess of light. It's very clear where the road signs are. They know how to get around good in that place. So this is a thing about Yosef here. This is an explanation of what Poras means. Another difference with Yosef is that not only he had trouble with his siblings who were all very good people, we've talked about that, but there were many of them too. He's had a wide variety of experiences and challenges that he has the perfect solutions for, because he's the guy who's called tzaddik. Yosef at tzaddik is the first time we really encountered that word tzaddik.
You can see that he approaches each brother differently.
Right. So Yosef at tzaddik has a very good internal stratiation. This is what's represented by the steps in Torah base and also by the 7 names of Hashem. So I'll read a little bit more in the Kehilas Yaakov, and that'll get the point in the shir here. Because Yosef is able to take all these different names of Hashem, take all these different experiences, put them into one path, one shvil, put them on one map. Now he's able to go around in the dark places. He's able to go into the city of mishpat. He knows his way around. Before we become a judge, we have to know our way around. We have to know what the actual situations are besides just for the halachas. And also he can go to the dark alleyways and he knows how to get around those. One other note here. I just said that someone has to know the issues that they're paskening on, and that's what it represents, having these different levels, besides for just knowing the halachas. Like a rav in kashrus, many people know the halachas. They know what's happening in the food production facilities. That's the difference. But even within Torah, my first job at the yeshiva was to put the books away. To put the books away. It was a thing that the rabbis asked us to do, and I wasn't able to learn that well at that point, so I wanted some good way to contribute, so I decided to put the books away. But in doing so, I had to know what all the books were, at least generally. Where does this book go? How do I know? Oh, it's a Talmud. Oh, this is a book of Chassidus. Oh, this is Zohar. This is a Chumash. This is Nach. This is the Torah. What is this? Or what shelf does that go on? And so you get a general sense of what all the books are. You start to know your way around. And now somebody says, oh, it says in the Shulchan Aruch, and you know what the Shulchan Aruch is. Says, oh, it says in the. Sometimes flip through the back of the Gemara, even if you don't necessarily know who each of those are. It says in the Rush. Oh, the Rush. I saw that before. I know how to look up in the Rush. In the Gemara, there's a little section in the top corner of the page that lists citations, and I teach a Gemara class, and every once in a while we do a review of how to read these citations, because if you can read these, I'm unclear on this Gemara. Let's see. Oh, here's where the Rambam says the answer. Here's where the Shulchan Aruch says the answer. Here's where the Smag says the answer. Go, you can pull the books right off the shelf, and you know exactly where they are. Okay.
Go ahead.
Ah.